What up, Bugles? I want to welcome you to this video and to our Comics Bugle channel, your go-to spot for everything omnibus and oversized. Tom King is without question one of the most talented and distinctive comic book writers of his generation. At the same time, he is also one of the most divisive. And for me personally, that pretty much sums up my entire relationship with his work. King is a creator I deeply respect, often admire, sometimes love, and just as often find incredibly frustrating. He's a classic hit or miss writer in my eyes. When he hits, he delivers stories that stay with you for years. When he misses, the fall can be spectacular, controversial, and in some cases, genuinely damaging the characters involved. What makes Tom King fascinating is that his voice is instantly recognizable. You can open almost any book he's written, and within a few pages, you know exactly who's behind it. The heavy use of repetition, rigid 9 panel grids, introspective monologues, fractured timelines, and an almost obsessive focus on guilt, trauma, and emotional pain. This isn't accidental. It's the result of a very specific worldview shaped long before he ever wrote his first comic. Before Tom King became a comic book writer, he worked for the CIA. And yes, he often downplayed that part of his life, describing himself as more of a desk guy, a paper pusher, an analyst rather than a field agent. But even if we take him at his word, you don't work for the CIA during the heights of the war on terror without being exposed to some very dark realities. You don't spend years immersed in an intelligence work without seeing how decisions, policies, and action rippled outward and destroyed lives. Whether he was directly involved or not almost doesn't matter. That environment leaves scars, and those scars are all over his writing. That's why the nickname Trauma King didn't come out of nowhere. His stories are deeply preoccupied with psychological damage, guilt, moral responsibility, PTSD, depression, anxiety. That feeling that something inside you is broken and can never truly be fixed. And what's interesting is that he doesn't expose these themes in abstract ways. He drills into them relentlessly, often through characters who traditionally were never meant to carry that kind of emotional weight. Superheroes, spies, soldiers, symbols. He's taken them apart and asked what happens when the mask came off and the trauma remains. His breakout work, Sheriff of Babylon, made it very clear from the start. This wasn't just a crime comic set in the post invasion Iraq, it was brutally honest, uncomfortable exploration of American guilt, occupation, cultural misunderstanding, and moral ambiguity. What a lot of people don't realize is that every single issue of Sheriff of Babylon had to be reviewed by the CIA before publication. That alone tells you how close to the bone King was cutting. This series feels authentic in a way that very few war comics do. It's bleak, quiet, angry, and deeply sad. There are no heroes here, just people trying to survive systems much larger than themselves. For me, it is still one of the purest expressions of a king's voice, unfiltered by superhero continuity or editorial constraints. When it transitioned fully into mainstream superhero comics, that same voice came with him, and that's where things started to get complicated. His vision for Marvel Comics is, in my opinion, one of his absolute masterpieces. This is Tom King operating in the perfect space for his sensibilities. A self contained story, limited in scope, deeply psychological, and framed almost like a suburban horror tragedy. Vision trying to build a perfect family in the suburbs is such a simple idea, but King turns it into a meditation on identity, otherness, and the impossibility of fitting into a world not built for you. The way grief and inevitability hang over that series is devastating. This is where I start to see a pattern that repeats throughout his career. King is at his best when the story can be read like an Elseworld, even if technically it's a canon. When the consequences are contained, the emotional impact hits harder without breaking the wider universe. The Omega Man for DC Comics is another strong example. Politically charged, morally messy, and intentionally uncomfortable, it reframes space opera tropes through the lens of insurgency, terrorism, and propaganda. It asks who gets to decide what freedom looks like and how violence is justifying depending on who's telling the story. Again, not a feel good comic, but a powerful one. And once again, a relatively isolated corner of the DC universe where King could push his ideas without derailing flagship characters. Grayson, co written with Tim Seeley, is another interesting chapter. This is where you see King experimenting with spy fiction more directly, blending his intelligence background with superhero storytelling. The tone is lighter, more playful, but still laced with paranoia and identity crisis. Dick Grayson losing his identity as Nightwing and being reshaped into a global operative works surprisingly well, and a lot of that comes down to the restraint. King didn't try to break the character to prove a point. He bent him, explored him, and then put him back together. And then we get to Batman. Tom King's Batman run is where my relationship with his work really fractures. I understand what he was trying to do. I genuinely do. He wanted to tell a long form psychological epic about Bruce Wayne's inability to be happy, his self sabotage, his addiction to trauma, and the idea that Batman doesn't believe he deserves joy. There are brilliant moments in that run, truly brilliant. But taken as a whole, it just doesn't work for me. The problem isn't ambition, the problem is control. King has a tendency to prioritize theme over character integrity, and nowhere is that more evident than in a long, heavily canon dependent runs. Batman becomes a vehicle for King's idea rather than a character with his own internal logic. Emotional beats are stretched beyond the breaking point. Symbolism replaces momentum, and when editorial plans shift, the entire structure collapses under its own weight. I won't dwell on it too long here, because I already done a dedicated deep dive on first omnibus of this run, where I talk more about why King worked better in contained formats than ongoing universe shaping roles. If Batman was divisive, Heroes in Crisis was catastrophic. For me, Heroes in Crisis is the best looking Bat comic of the last decade. The art is stunning, absolutely gorgeous, and yet the story is fundamentally broken. The decision to center the narrative around the destruction of Wally West's legacy was a massive mistake, not just emotionally, but structurally. It betrayed the character, defense, and the very idea of healing that the book claimed to explore. The fact that DC has spent years retconning, softening, and outright undoing the story says everything. When a publisher has to repeatedly apologize to continuity, something went very wrong. This is the dark side of Tom King's approach, when trauma becomes the point rather than the consequences. But I need to say, I actually loved most of Talking Head's therapy pages though, and the one with Harley explaining her relationship with Joker was so on point and one of my all-time favorite Harley Quinn scenes. Now let's talk about his DC mini or maxi series because that is where his strength is. Mr. Miracle is without exaggeration a modern classic, a masterpiece. This is Tom King at full power, fully unleashed, but within a perfectly chosen framework. A story about depression, marriage, parenthood, and the lingering effects of abuse wrapped in four wall mythology. It's heartbreaking, surreal, funny, and terrifying all at once. This is the book I point to when people ask why I still believe in Tom King's despite everything. It's proof that when his obsession aligns with the material, the results can be extraordinary. Strange Adventures follows a similar path, interrogating heroism, propaganda, and the lies we tell ourselves to survive. Human Tiger strips superhero down to noir archetypes and asks whether any of them deserve redemption. These are stories that feel complete, intentional, and emotionally honest, even when they're uncomfortable. I may not agree with every choice he makes, but I can't deny the craft. King's name clearly attracts attention, and in DC Comics, they know it. So they let him play with another iconic hero from their roster in an in continuity long term run. I talk about Diana, Amazon Princess. His current Wonder Woman run is really interesting case. It's politically charged, unapologetic, and clearly resonating with a large audience. Whether it will ultimately hold together remains to be seen, but it shows that King is still very much a relevant and influential voice in mainstream comics. Outside of comics, Tom King has also carried out a significant presence in Hollywood. He's been involved in multiple adaptations and development projects. James Gunn has been very open about the fact that he is a huge fan of King's work, and honestly, it makes perfect sense. They share a similar sensibility. Both like to take colorful, almost naive superhero archetypes and smash them head on into very adult themes like trauma, regret, loneliness, and moral compromise. Gunn just does it with pop songs and neon violence, while King does it with 9 panel grids and internal monologues that feel therapy session gone wrong. The clearest proof of this mutual respect is Supergirl, Woman of Tomorrow. Gunn has repeatedly highlighted it as one of his favorite modern DC stories, and the upcoming Supergirl movie is expected to draw heavily from King's take on the character. That's huge. Woman of Tomorrow redefines Kara Zor-El as a deeply wounded, angry, yet fundamentally compassionate character, and it tone fits perfectly with the kind of emotional grounded, character-first superhero films Gunn seems to be aiming for at DC Studios. If this film lands, it could cement Tom King as one of the most influential comic voices shaping the next era of DC on screen, for better or worse. King is also never been shy about expressing his political views, which has made him both admired and criticized. His very public beef with Dean Cain is just one example of how comfortable he is being outspoken, even when it invites backlash. And maybe that's the core of Tom King as a creator. He doesn't play it safe. He doesn't aim for universal approval. Sometimes that results in deeply moving, unforgettable stories. Other times it leads to the self indulgence, misjudgment, and backlash that could have been avoided with a bit more restraint. For me, Tom King is a writer I approach with caution, but also genuine excitement. I know that any new project from him could be something I absolutely love or something that completely loses me. And honestly, I would rather have that than bland consistency. He's flawed, talented, stubborn, brilliant, and occasionally infuriating. But he's never boring. And in modern superhero comics, that still counts for a lot. Of course, you can find these fantastic stories in our eShop, comicsbugle.com, your friendly neighborhood comic book shop in Europe. Accept the great catalog of collected, deluxe, and absolute editions, epic collections, and omnibuses. We guaranteed you eco-friendly Hulkproof packaging, free shipping in whole EU, an option to pre-order your comic book now and pay for it later. You can also split full price to 4 separate payments because we know how expensive these books can be. So check it out, comicsbugle.com. You can find direct links below this video. And that's all. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to smash the like and subscribe button so you don't miss out any further videos. In our comment section, let us know what other books or topics would you like to see in our videos. And see ya, Bugles!